In this recording, I'm going to be doing a demonstration of bottom-up parsing, in which case bottom-up parsing finds the handle of a given right sentinel form by examining the symbols on one or both sides of a possible handle. Symbols on the right of the possible handle are usually tokens in the input and have not yet been analyzed. The most common bottom-up parser algorithm are in the LR family, where L specifies the leftmost scan of the input and R specifies that the rightmost derivation is generated. For example, the string that I'm going to be parsing is parentheses ID, multiplication sign ID, parentheses plus sign ID, into using this grammar and these rules. These are the same rules provided in the book. I'll just be using a different string to parse this grammar. Using different string with this grammar. As we can see here, we start with at our start state 0, and we see that at our state 0 and the parenthesis symbol, when we look it up, we see it's shift 4. So we shift 4, we shift our opening parentheses, place our 4 there, and now we have 4 ID. We look up on our table now and we see 4 ID is shift 5. So we shift ID again and we see we place our 5 cap ID and we continue. We see 5 multiplication symbol down here is R6, so we reduce 6. And we go to our reduce 6, our rule says ID converts to F. So everything after 4 gets converted to F. So we are left with 0, open parentheses, 4, F3. And now we look up our chart, 3 multiplication symbol, and we see that is reduce 4. So that is reduce 4. So 4, rule 4 says that F becomes T. So that's right here. So we see we convert our F to T. So we have 4T, and 4T in our chart says that we go to 2. So now 2 asterisk in our chart is shift 7. So we shift 7, so we shift our multiplication symbol and we cap it with 7. And now we're looking at our positional marker is looking at 7 ID. 7 ID is shift 5. So now we shift another token over. So now we have 7 ID and 5. And we cap it with our 5 again. Our shift, and now we're looking at 5 closing parentheses. 5 closing parentheses is rule 6. So rule 6 says that ID becomes F, and so ID gets converted to F, and 7F yields that we go to 10. So we have a cap of 10. 10 closing parentheses. It's rule 3. Rule 3 states that, of course, T times F becomes T. So we have a T here at the 4, above the 4, times an F. So everything after the 4 now becomes T. So now we're left with 4T, and the 2 to get our go to, we look up 4T, and we see that 4T says go to 2, so that's where we get our 2 from. 2 closing parentheses now, we get R2, which is rule 2, and rule 2 says that T becomes E, so now we convert our T to E, and we continue up here, our T to E, and now 4E now is we go to 8. So now we're looking at 8 parentheses, closing parentheses, 8 closing parentheses tells us that we shift 11. So now we shift our closing parentheses over, and we cap at 11, and now we're a positional marker looking at 11 plus. 11 plus is R5, Rule 5, and Rule 5 says that open parentheses, E, closing parentheses becomes F, and we see we do have that right here. So everything after 0 becomes an F. So now we have 0F. 0F tells us that when we look it up, tells us that we go to 3. Now positionally we're at 3 plus, looking at 3 plus on the stack. And so now 3 plus on the stack tells us that we look up Rule 4. So 3 plus on the stack, we look up Rule 4. Rule 4 tells us that F becomes T. Of course, F now gets converted to T. And looking up 0T tells us that we go to 2. So that's where we get this 2 from. Now 2T now we're looking at when we look up in the stack. 2 plus, I mean, when we're looking up in the stack, in the table, tells us we go to Rule 2. So Rule 2 tells us that T becomes E, so now we convert our T to E, and thus we get 0E. Now, to get our 1, we look up 0E, and we see it tells us go to 1, and that's where we get this 1 from. Now, 1 plus is shift 6. So now we shift 6, so we shift our plus sign over onto the stack, and now we cap it with the 6. And now positionally we're looking at 6ID. 6ID is shift 5. Shift 5, we move ID onto the stack and we cap with the 5. And we're looking at $5 sign now. $5 sign tells us that we apply Rule 6. Rule 6 states that ID equals F. So where we have ID previously, we cap with an F, and we look up 6F, which tells us that we go to 3. That's where we get this 3 from. Now we're positionally looking at $3 sign, which tells us that we go to Rule 4. Rule 4 tells us that F becomes T. So now we convert F to T down here, and we look up 6T. 6T tells us that we go to 9. That's where we get this 9 from. Now we're positionally looking at $9 sign on the stack, and $9 sign is R1. R1, Rule 1, tells us that E plus T becomes E. And of course E, this everything after 0, E1 plus 6T9, all of that becomes E. And then when we look up 0E on the table, we see we go to 1. That's where we get this 1 from. And now $1 sign is accept. And we're done. And that's it. And that's how we would parse this string using our parsing table, our LR parsing table onto the stack. Thank you. I hope you understand everything.